Hey everyone, welcome back to the Critic-Verse. Today we're going to be talking about the Season 3 finale of Superman and Lois, titled, What Kills You Only Makes You Stronger. And by now, it's known the series has been renewed for Season 4, but the cast has been severely reduced. So let's see how that can be accomplished. But before we get to the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep up with all things Critic-Verse. Now, on to the review. Once again, the episode is titled, What Kills You Only Makes You Stronger. This title is a play on the popular phrase, What Doesn't Kill You Only Makes You Stronger, a usual expression that comes into play when someone is recovering physically or mentally. The parody of the phrase clearly is in reference to the bizarro version of Clark from Season 2, who was resurrected and found by Luthor, who does some unsavory things to him to create the ultimate weapon against Superman. The episode begins with another narration by Lois, and we get a 32-day time jump, and then a montage of where most of our characters are, and not a peep has been heard from Luthor since his last appearance in the previous episode. Sam discusses with Clark and Lois that Luthor hasn't been heard from, and Lois is a little on edge. Next, the boys have ended their sophomore year at school and are helping coach the very next day set up for a meteor shower event in the town square, mostly out of guilt for John because Jordan pokes that he ruined the coach's football season. Jordan is still grounded from using his powers, and Clark tells him he has to find something to occupy himself with for the summer. Sam advises to Clark not to let Jordan's grounding go on for too long, or his anger may fester and turn him even further against them. Next, Kyle wakes Chrissy up, and she wakes him up to the effects of not using protection, because she's pregnant and they worry about telling Lana. Cut to Lana and John Henry, and John asks Lana out on a date, and she says yes. Then, Clark talks to Lois about going over old Lex files, but Lois stops Clark and says that she's ready. Or at least that she wants to try again to be intimate, and tells Clark to fly them to Tao's vacation villa like at the beginning of the season. And we get this really romantic scene of Clark and Lois rekindling their intimacy. Next, before John and Jordan head to set up for the meteor shower, when Lois and Clark stop them to tell them they want to take a family vacation and use Tao's villa for the whole family instead of just romantic rendezvous between them. At the Cushing house, Kyle tells Lana and the girls that he and Chrissy are pregnant, and as a nice surprise, everyone is happy for him. Next, at the Irons home, John Henry is asking fashion advice from Nat when Sam arrives and tells him that the DoD actually wants to offer him a job, having him make more equipment for them, but that he would need to move to Metropolis. And Nat can go to the DoD Academy, where, luckily for her, Mateo has just enrolled in. And I guess since Season 4 is up and running, this may be a chance to move most of the characters that the show may want to keep to Metropolis, since they don't actually own the rights to the Kent farm anymore. At the event, Coach Gaines is putting Jonathan through the ringer, even though he says he'll never forgive him for ruining his football program, but Jonathan tries his best anyway. Clark and Lois congratulate Chrissy when Clark hears that Judge Reagan has been murdered. And Lois figures Luthor did it to send her a message, and she's worried about who's next. At the show, Sam introduces his date to his grandchildren, and they are all shocked, especially with the pair's PDA. Now, if you've been keeping up with the show's behind-the-scenes photos, this woman is actually familiar, but somehow I forgot who she is. But At the family dinner, Clark, Lois, and the boys talk about the trip, and Clark suggests that instead of paying for plane tickets, that he and Jordan can fly John and Lois there themselves, and they can save money. But the pair witness Jordan being rude to Sarah while she's just trying to do her job and are not happy with him. Sam's date pulls him into an alleyway under the guise of hooking up and even takes his phone off of him. But Otis pulls up behind him, and when Sam addresses him, Sam's date tases him and tells Otis to put him in the van and they have to get back to Luthor. Not that shocking, really. Clark and Jordan have a talk about Sarah and that Jordan is acting out and he needs to go make things right because he's just trying to transfer his pain onto her. Next, Jordan apologizes to Sarah and they agree to not try and be friends, but that they need to take time to work on themselves, and they shake on it. John Henry admits to faking that he needed to come and update Lana's security system as just an excuse to have asked her out earlier. But he also admits to her that he and Nat are moving to Metropolis, just so he can make more money with the DoD and set up steelworks. I guess a mechanic shop that he and Nat had planned, or a business. Later, Nat comes to Lois and Clark, worried that Sam isn't answering his phone. Lois calls him herself, but Clark finds the phone in the alleyway, and Lois figures that this is Luthor's doing. Cut to Bruno's old lab, where Lex has a henchman feeding a cow to something. When Otis and Sam's date arrive, Otis hands him Sam's ELT and says Superman is next. Cut back to 32 days ago, when Luthor first discovered Bizarro. He shot him with an XK gun, you know, the kryptonite guns that we've seen all season, but this time powered by XK, and seemingly kills Bizarro, but Bizarro seems to be always coming back every time he dies. And Luthor notes by some skin movement on his hand that Bizarro is somehow growing into something else. Next, we get a scene where Luthor chains Bizarro up and tells him to let him kill him to the point that nothing can kill him ever again. Then we get a whole death loop of Luthor killing Bizarro time and time again with various method and tools. And it's really taking a toll on Bizarro as he starts to turn into something monstrous. Superman, trying to listen for Sam, only hears Luthor pulling up to the Kent farm. And after a brief conversation, Luthor uses the ELT and Bizarro lands, destroying the Kent barn. And Lex tells him, after a brief fight, to bring him Superman's heart. It seems that Bizarro is the doomsday of this universe. The fight lands right back on Main Street as Clark tells Jordan and the Irons to stay back while he and Bizarro fight. They begin to fight in mid-air until, while fighting underwater, Superman freezes Bizarro, picks him out of the water, and drops the icicle right onto the spike of a skyscraper, impaling Bizarro. While Clark lands, telling everyone that everything's okay and that the fight's over, he can hear Bizarro is healing, coming back to life, breaks the tip off the spike, and flies off of it. And then the two are flying, colliding against each other, while Bizarro beats Superman into the subway, beating him to a pulp. And this does not look good for Clark. As Jordan looks on, he can't hear Clark's heartbeat, but Clark can hear Lois whisper his name. And in his mind, the events of Season 3 with his family flash through his head. And as the yellow sun washes over him, he wakes up and knocks Bizarro into the moon. And then we get a final shot of Clark and Bizarro heading for a collision, only for it to end on a freeze frame before the two collide. And that is the cliffhanger ending of Season 3. Wow, what an epic finale to the end of a great season. Bizarro's introduction in season 2 was only just foreshadowing for this season finale, as Bizarro has essentially become this universe's version of Doomsday. It was also clear why Bizarro let this happen to him. Back on his world, we saw that Bizarro fell to a kryptonite addiction because it made him better. So it's clear why he wouldn't want to be able to be killed again. But it just felt like Luthor was manipulating him. At that point, Bizarro felt more like a wounded animal, because unlike last time where he could speak backwards, he was only speaking in grunts and growls. And it just felt like Luthor was just taking advantage of someone in a bad spot. Okay, I did see behind the scenes photos of Lex and his crew, but quickly blocked out what the woman looked like. So when she appeared on screen as Sam's date, I completely forgot what her intentions were. Well, up until it happened. I believe the family may be moving to Metropolis. That's why it felt like a wrap-up for certain characters like Kyle and Chrissy, Sarah and Jordan's romance plotline, and a little bit for Lana. But it also was clear about the Irons family, how they might be continuing on with the show in a reduced role because they are moving to Metropolis, where I believe that the Kents are too, since the barn blew up. Just to keep them on the show at least. All in all, I think this was a really great season. Definitely had a lot of time skips per episode, like weeks to months would pass between episodes. Which is one thing that I didn't like. One thing that didn't make sense to me is that Clark knew that Bruno had Bizarro's corpse, and for months he just seemed to let that go, despite quickly destroying the vials of blood that the DoD had of his. Which kind of didn't go with how the writing was, but hey, who knows? The final shot being a freeze frame was insane to me because there's no resolution. Meaning if the show hadn't have been picked up for season 4, that's where it all would have ended. And I wouldn't have liked that personally because, like I said, no resolution. But luckily it did get picked up and we can see how this fight really ends. Because we can see whether or not if the show will go with the death of Superman storyline and continue with the resurrection of Superman, considering that they only have 10 episodes for season 4. And I can't wait to see what the future holds for the Kent family. Which one of the characters come back in a reduced role. We know that Dylan Walsh is not coming back for season 4 after his wife stated on her IG, so General Lane might not survive this. Also, like I said before, season 4 will only have 10 episodes, and Michael Cutlass, who plays Lex Luthor, has been promoted to a series regular, so he might possibly be season 4 and possibly the final season villain. Anyway, I can't wait for season 4. But don't forget to tell me in the comments what your favorite and least favorite moments from season 3 were. Thank you for joining me in the Critic-Verse. I'll see you next time.